Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
You unlock this sports talk show with the key of knowledge. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sight.
I once was at an all-star game where all 6 home runs that were hit in that game were by Hall of Famers.
Which game was that?
1971.
Oh, that's the Tiger Stadium, right?
That was the one where Reggie hit the light tower. You had 3 National League homers prior to that. You had Hammer and Hank Aaron. You had Johnny Bench. You had some really good players. And, of course, Reggie and Harmon Killebrew, who his homer was off of another Hall of Famer, and that was off Fergie Jenkins. And it was kind of cool to see all these guys hit home runs, and every one of them made the Hall of Fame.
A dimension of sound.
I was in Houston when the White Sox won the World Series. They swept the thing 4-0. We know Big Frank was injured. He helped them quite a bit during the first maybe 2/3 of the season. Then he was down with an injury and he was on the disabled list the rest of the year. I got into the clubhouse and the first guy I saw in there was Frank, and I went right up to him. I said, "Look, I know you wanted to play, but this was just as much about you as it was." And he had a big smile on his face, and he really appreciated me saying that. And it was a big thrill to be able to say that because the guy was a fantastic player.
A dimension of mind.
I've been to Fairbanks, Alaska, and trust me, I've been up there when it was absolutely colder than hell.
All right, I'm going to ask a stupid question. What the fuck were you doing up there?
UIC was playing hockey against Alaska Fairbanks.
I knew there was a good reason for that. Did you take a dog sled to get there? Mush! You should have entered the Iditarod while you were there.
Well, you know what? Actually, there was a bit that Steve Dahl used to do similar to that, except he said, "I did abroad."
Okay.
You're entering a land of both debate and accord. A battle of wits. You've just crossed over into the Grobstein and Schuster zone.
And welcome into the latest edition of the Grobstein Schuster Zone. I'm David Schuster, and he, of course, is Mr. Les Grobstein. And Les, we took last week off, and poof, the baseball season is over. And also, the Bears season might be over, too.
Gone. History, toast. We had 3 teams go bye-bye. We had the Bears. They're still playing, obviously, and as you and I talk, they're 3-1.
Yeah.
And they probably shouldn't even be that good, but they are. Hey, good luck to them, and I'm a Bears fan. I want to see them do well. We know that as far as the Sox and the Cubs, they both went bye-bye quickly, just like they did in 2008. In 2008, the Cubs got swept by the Dodgers, and the Cubs actually had home field advantage for that thing. And then they went out to L.A., as you remember, and got eliminated in just 1 game out there. And then after that was over and done, the White Sox did get to win 1 game over Tampa Bay, and then they were knocked out. I thought the White Sox, they had a chance to do a little bit better this time around. The Cubs, the last couple of years, they just haven't scored any runs.
Listen, we're going to talk about the Cubs and the White Sox. We're also going to talk to Paul Sullivan of the Tribune. You can follow him on Twitter at PW Sullivan. We're going to talk to him in just a little bit. And we will go extensively on a lot of things that you just talked about, the Cubs and the White Sox. Let's just do a quick post-mortem on the Bears. I mean, we're recording this on Monday afternoon. You and I were at the game yesterday. And honestly, Les, I almost had to put toothpicks in my eyes just to stay awake.
Is that what you were sticking in your eyes?
Yes. Well, either that or a fork. Did you see the food that they gave us yesterday? Oh my God, they tried to poison us.
We used to get a nice hot meal. Now, nope.
Yeah, and I sort of get it. I mean, obviously the whole pandemic, they're going to go with box lunches, but my God, can't you at least put something that wouldn't kill a rat if they ate it? Anyway, that's the whole besides the point. Let's talk about the Bears, though, yesterday. I thought the game yesterday against Indianapolis, I hate to say it, Les, I picked the Bears to win the first 3 games like they did, although composite, they played against teams that were 1-8, so it's no great shake. But I've picked them ultimately to finish 8-8. I have a side bet with our Greg Gabriel on our football podcast. He thinks they're going to do better than 8-8. I say no chance. So there's a lot of money at stake between Greg and I. It's $5. I don't know if you can even get a meal at a fast food place for $5, but that's what's on the line here. They just weren't good. I mean, the offensive line is, I hate to say it, is not very good. They have 2 mediocre quarterbacks. The play calling was awful yesterday. Not only my opinion, but everybody on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. I don't know. I just don't see this. And the schedule is only going to get tougher as time goes on, too.
Well, yeah, they got Pretty Boy coming to town on Thursday night of this week, and Tampa Bay, without him, they still have a pretty good team even without Brady, but with him, they're obviously a contending type of team, and Tampa Bay has a decent defense, and they've got some good players that they put around Brady, etc. As far as what went on in that game yesterday, Nagy reverted back to last year, parts where he just didn't run the football. They ran away from, some of the things that they had been doing. And what did they end up running the ball that one game last year about 7 times? This time they might have run the ball about maybe, 10 or 12 times?
Through 3 quarters, it was 11 runs for 20 yards. And I think ultimately it wasn't much more than that, obviously. And, Tampa Bay's coming in here with even a better, statistically, run defense than Indianapolis does. I mean, gosh. I mean, you're going to throw it all on if it becomes a shootout between Foles and Brady, I mean, you can mail in the score in advance.
The Bears lose and Bear fans lose. And you were talking about during the game yesterday, and I agreed with you 100%. The one major disappointment was not that they played so bad and that they got beat. The disappointment was that there were no fans in the stands, because the booing would have been absolutely incredible how loud. You would have been able to hear the booing across Lake Michigan into Benton Harbor.
Yeah, but I heard you booing, Les. I was sitting right next to you. I heard you booing. Oh, wait, you were booing the food at lunch.
Well, I was doing it without any kind of, I'm basically using the old boo, like that.
Oh, that was like a Casper boo. You remember Casper, the friendly ghost?
Of course.
Casper, the friendly ghost, the friendliest ghost you know. Though grown-ups might look at him with fright, the children all love him so.
Didn't he have like an alter ego or a cousin or something like that?
Spooky.
Spooky!
Hiya, Casper! Gee, Ma, Cousin Spooky's real cute.
I don't know why I'm laughing about that, but I just...
You're laughing because I remember that Spooky was his alter ego.
Oh, gosh.
Or cousin.
All right, anyway, so yeah, I mean, do you disagree with me, Les? I mean, the Bears, they were exposed yesterday for
they
being
were lucky.
At best an average team.
All 3 wins that they got, they were lucky to win. They shouldn't have beat Detroit. They definitely should not have beaten Atlanta. Atlanta, just a bunch of garbage. I mean, why is Quinn still coaching that team? I mean, that's their problem. It's not our problem. But he gave away that Super Bowl. They stopped running the football. They kept throwing passes against New England, and that's why they left them enough time. Otherwise, there's no way the Patriots come back. And that game that they had the previous week was absolutely a travesty. And the coaching on that Atlanta team, they have big leads. And I knew that game against Atlanta, even in the first quarter, where the Falcons hadn't even taken a big... You just knew that thing was going to fade away and they were going to lose that game.
All right, well, I mean, the Bears coming into yesterday, the teams that they had beaten were 1-8. Let's take a look. I mean, the Giants lost again. I mean, this is great, Les. The New York teams are 0-8. I love it.
The Lions lost again?
The Lions came from ahead to lose again. And the Falcons... Did they play yesterday? No, they haven't played. Do they play tonight? They play tonight. They'll lose. Okay, so...
They're playing up in Lambeau Field. They got no chance in hell.
So that means that the 3 teams that the Bears beat will be, after tonight, and we're recording this on Monday afternoon, will be 1-11. Now, that's not exactly something to hang your hat on. The Bears won the games. Can never take that away from them. But it just all adds up to me that the Bears are not that good a football team.
What it means is they're going to get a lesser draft pick at the end of the season, because they're not going to make the playoffs. They end up winning some games they shouldn't win, and you can't tell them to intentionally lose games. But how many times have we seen them win games where the fans want, just like the Bulls, people wanted to see them lose games to get a higher draft pick, and you got that's a whole different situation because of the lottery. But in case of the NFL, a lot of fans, when they know they're not going anywhere, want to see them lose so they can end up getting a better draft pick.
You know what, Aldo, the more I think about this, get Greg Gabriel on the phone. I want to change the podcast. That $5 was not enough. And the more I talk about this, let's put a couple of zeros at the end of this, because I just don't see the Bears. The Bears are not going to win more than 8 games.
They got a tough schedule.
Did Greg really say that? And I have a lot of respect for Greg, because I know you do too.
He says they're going to be at least 9-7.
No,
Yeah.
Last year they weren't 8-8. I don't care what the final record shows. That last game that made them 8-8, The Vikings had already clinched their playoff spot.
They didn't care.
Couldn't go higher or lower, and they were intentionally going out there and sitting people out, kind of like Lovey used to do with the Bears.
Okay, still to come on this podcast. Again, we're going to talk to Paul Sullivan from the Tribune in just a moment here. We're also going to have our famous segments at the end of our podcast, Stump the Grobber, and there's some really interesting questions that have been sent in here, and our name segment, and I will give you a little hint in advance, Les. All 4 names, Hall of Famers.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll both have a lot to say about
I
those.
once was at an all-star game where all 6 home runs that were hit in that game at Tiger Stadium were by Hall of Famers.
Which game was that?
1971.
Oh, that's the at Tiger Stadium, right?
That was the one where Reggie hit the light tower. You had 3 National League homers prior to that. You had Hammer and Hank Aaron. You had Johnny Bench. You had some really good players. And, of course, Reggie and Harmon Killebrew, who his homer was off of another Hall of Famer, and that was off Fergie Jenkins. And it was kind of cool to see all these guys hit home runs, and every one of them made the Hall of Fame.
Okay, speaking of baseball, let's talk about the Cubs and the White Sox. It's a season that I've already forgotten about because I didn't really invest that much emotion into it to begin with. I mean, the 60-game sprint and all that, they're going to crown a champion. God bless them. It's not going to be the Cubs or the White Sox. And just, I don't know, it just didn't do anything for me. And I'm sure a lot of people out there, you're going to get your diehards, the Cubs and White Sox fans, that are going to be cheerful by the fact that they made the playoffs or frustrated that they bowed out very quickly. But for me, I don't know. It's a season that I want to blow off. But you still have to go forward now. And looking forward, the Cubs didn't hit a lick. And not only have they did not hit a lick again this whole season, but if you go back, Les, and I did, because I do my research on these things, the last 9 postseason games, and I include that play-in game, by the way, against Milwaukee. I consider that a postseason game. So the last 9 postseason games by the Cubs, do you realize they scored a grand total of 11 runs? You don't win too many games.
Doesn't surprise me. Yeah, they got beat by the Brewers. That gave the Brewers the division. Then that reverted the Cubs into the wild card game the very next day with Colorado. And what did they do? Score one run?
It was 1 run in both games. And go back further in 2017, and they did win that series at Washington. That was when they played late into the night.
And they were lucky to win that game.
9-8, they won that game. But then they went out to Los Angeles, and in the 5 games before they were eliminated, they scored 2-1-1, 3-1. Okay, then as you mentioned, Les, the play-in game against Milwaukee, they scored 1 run. The next day, they had the wild card game. Again, they scored 1 run, and unfortunately, they took 13 or 14 innings to only score the 1 run. So, it was endlessly waiting there, taking a piss for the game to goddamn end already. And then, they didn't make the playoffs in 2019, and then here in 2020, they score all of 1 run in 2 games against Miami. So if you add it all up, 9 postseason games, counting the play-in game, 11 runs.
It's amazing. The Marlins...
With the players that they have on their roster.
As we talk, the Marlins still have never lost a playoff series. By the time this hits the cast, it might. But as we know, in 97, they won the World Series, beating Cleveland. And then in 03, we know what ended up happening there. They ended up beating the Giants, then they ended up beating the Cubs, and then they ended up beating the Yankees. And who would have thunk of any of that stuff? And this is the Marlins, for crying out loud.
All right, well, the Cubs, for crying out loud, I'm going to put you in charge. You are now Theo Epstein, and by the way, Theo Epstein had his press conference earlier today, pretty much non-committal what's going to happen with his future. I mean, yes, he will probably highly likely still remain as Cubs club president for the next season, I should say. But then his contract is up, and he didn't come right out and say it, but the indications are that he's not going to be here beyond next season.
I'm fully invested in the Cubs and open to anything that's in the best interest of the organization. I think my expectation and Tom's expectation is that means status quo for now as we go into 2021. But a status quo that is mindful of the importance of transition planning and mindful of some of the unique circumstances that we have. We're clearly entering an off-season that will require some critical decisions that have long-term impacts for the organization on the field and some off the field as well. So because of that, we're just going to be open-minded and thoughtful about it and take our time. And if adjustments in structure or role or timing are necessary to put the Cubs in the best possible position going forward, then that's what I want. I think we all feel like the most likely outcome again is status quo. But in a thoughtful manner as we move forward.
So I'm putting you in charge, Les. What are you going to do with the Cubs?
He's basically hinted that anyway, that he was going to be having a shelf life of 10 years.
Yep.
At this point, I don't think they will break that team up as a lot of people think they ought to. I think they're going to keep most of the key elements together. And then I think that if they are just as bad, maybe by, let's say they have a full season next year and maybe the coronavirus goes bye-bye. If they are still real bad by around the All-Star break,
Then they
there's
can
a
start trading them all.
possibility they're going to dump people. I don't think they'll trade them all, but they'll trade some. And you mentioned Rizzo, and he is a key guy, and he's a good guy to have on any ball club anyway. He gets it. He's a terrific person to have on any ball club, and I don't think he's going anywhere.
All right, I think they are going to make some trades here in the offseason. And again, whether it's Theo in charge following next season or Jed takes over, they'll be collaborating together. I think whether it's Schwarber or Rizzo, well, Rizzo's not going to go anywhere. I agree with that, Les. Whether it's Schwarber or Bryant or Baez, somebody's going to go. And while you still have some control over somebody, at least for 1 year, I think it's more advantageous to trade them to get something back as opposed to waiting till the trading deadline of next season, if next season's a regular season, because you're not going to get that much back. It's a rental player at that point. So I do think somebody's going to go. You got to get another starting pitcher. John Lester will be gone unless he, takes next to nothing to stay here, and I don't see that happening, even though he's getting $10 million on the buyout. But more than anything else, and I've been bitching about this for 3 years now, get a goddamn leadoff hitter. And what I mean by a leadoff hitter, and you know how I am, Les, I'm very traditional.
I am
when
too.
It comes to this. Get a leadoff hitter who's got speed, who can get on base, one of so many different ways.
Like Tim Anderson for the White Sox.
Yeah, and actually he's not even a prototypical,
But he's got some power.
But he's got power, but he also gets on base. That's where he can hit his way on base. Get somebody who's just going to get on base, who's got speed, who can beat out an infield single, who can go from first to third, who can steal second when the situation calls for it. Yes, I know the game has changed. I don't care. I'm an old-fashioned person when it comes to this shit. And so get me a leadoff hitter. And by the way, the fact that they haven't had one for 3 years, it's not the only reason they haven't gone anywhere, but it's certainly a contributing factor.
Without Dexter Fowler, they don't win the World Series in 2016. They don't win the pennant that year without him. He was terrific. And then he's gone. He becomes a free agent, goes to the Cardinals, and all the next couple of years, a guy who just would not back off of the situation was Joe Madden. He kept saying, that's like 1947. What is this, Jackie Robinson year? I mean, come on. That was a stupid comment that Madden made, and now he's rotting and burning in hell in Anaheim because they've got some great players and the rest of that team stinks, but that's another story. The bottom line is it's Theo, it's Hoyer, and doing what they're doing. They want the uppercut. They want people swinging for the fences.
They might have to change their philosophy because guess what? 2016 is now 4 years back, okay? Time flies. And, you haven't done anything of consequence since 2016. So it's time. It's time to make some changes. Let's talk about the White Sox. We'll do this with Paul Sullivan in just a bit also. The nucleus is there. Yes, they bowed out probably earlier than most people thought, and they should have won one more game out.
The
in
Oakland Coliseum's always been a chamber of horrors for the Sox.
They
going all the way
games
back to Reggie Jackson. They hated playing in that place.
Okay, they did, and they didn't perform very well. And listen, Ricky Renteria.
They won a game though.
They did win one game.
They could have won either of the others. They didn't quit.
Okay.
As Hawk Harrelson said, Ricky's boys never quit.
Okay, but they lost. All right, so if you're the White Sox and you're Rick Hahn, I mean, the future is obviously bright going forward because the nucleus is there, and they still have some more young players, specifically like Andrew Vaughn, who's going to be added. Crochet, you saw what the kid can do, and hopefully he's healthy. Listen, nothing wrong with having a guy who throws 102 in your rotation. They're going to get Michael Kopech, I hope, back.
Oh, that was sickening. The day he got sick and they announced, or hurt, and he was going to be going onto Tommy John surgery. That
That's
was
2 years ago now. I mean,
it was sick the day it happened.
Okay,
though.
but this past season, he took the year off, if you will, because, I don't know, supposedly he's suffering from some mental depressions or something like that. Anyway, hopefully he's healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and you add him to the equation. The White Sox future is very bright, but again, Ricky Renteria is the person who's the piñata for White Sox fans. They beat up on him all the time. Is that too much in your opinion, Les?
Yes, it is. I think he has a very good chance of being there a little bit. Fans are starting. The only time I agreed with the fans to get rid of somebody when they got rid of Terry Bevington, and we all wanted to see that happen. Ricky Renteria, he got hosed by the Cubs. I mean, they wanted Joe Madden. When he became available, they just dumped Ricky Renteria. And then eventually he surfaced as a coach with the White Sox and then became their manager, as we all know. But I thought that he got a raw deal. Did they pay him off? Yeah, they did. They paid him the money he had coming, but that whole thing still stunk to high holy hell the way they treated him.
All right, again, we're going to get to Paul Sullivan in just a moment. One more baseball note, Les, because unfortunately there's been a lot of great players in all sports that have passed away, not only from COVID, but from other things recently. And the one that, there's so many, it saddens me, but when they announced that Bob Gibson passed away just recently, and God, so many Cardinals. I mean, Lou Brock went earlier than him also, but Bob Gibson is one of the all-timers, and I know you'll have some thoughts on this. Let me just throw some numbers at you real quickly. Bob Gibson, in his career, 251 wins, 174 losses. He had a career ERA of 2.91, and this is when ball players... I don't know. There's a better era of ball players for me. The 68 season still goes down as one of the greatest of all times when he had the 1.12 ERA. Do you realize, Les, he lost 9 games that year?
And he wasn't taken out in the middle of any inning that year by Red Schoendienst. He wasn't taken out. But the Cubs, the next year, they beat him. The first time I ever saw a game in Busch Stadium was July 4th of 69. And again, this was after the mound had already been lowered a little bit. But the first time I saw a game there, the temperature was about 95 degrees, and the temperature humidity index felt like about 115 there. And it was Fergie Jenkins against Bob Gibson. And the game was tied 1-1. It went extra innings. And this was one time that Gibson was taken out of the game because Kessinger got a triple off of him. Billy Williams singled him in, and then Schoendienst went out and made the change, and they took Gibson out. And that was like a stunner because the fans in St. Louis weren't used to seeing Bob Gibson removed. But Gibson also was a fantastic hitter. He was a great athlete. He could have played, he did play briefly with the Harlem Globetrotters, and probably could have been a good NBA type of player, is what a lot of people have said, and I wouldn't have doubted it.
All right, I got to go back to the 68 season because, again, the 1.12 ERA just, stands out like a sore thumb.
Bob Gibson, who set a new National League record for earned run average this year, 1.12.
He had 13 shutouts that season.
A bunch of them were 1-0 too.
Absolutely. I mean, again, he lost 9 times. So of those 9 losses, I bet he probably lost 1-0 in those games.
That year, Jenkins won 20 games for the second year in a row. And what happened that season was he lost 1-0 to Gibson 3 times that year. But he also beat him a couple of times.
All right, so in 69, the following season, he had an ERA of 2.18. Probably people thought, God, he had a shit season. Because after last year, 1.12, 2.18, which is obviously great.
Well, they screwed up the pitcher's mound.
Yeah, that's true also. All right, so in World Series play, by the way, he had over 3,000 strikeouts, of course. In the World Series, and he was in the World Series, I think, 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. He had a record of 7-2.
He got him! Struck him out! Look at the scene on the field. McCarver, the first one. Now his infielders all over him. A new world's record of 17 strikeouts in one game.
He had an ERA in World Series play of 1.89. You got to remember, there were no playoffs then. It was just World Series.
No, you went right in there and you won the pennant. That's it.
Okay, now here's some other. The numbers just, when I looked this up, it just blew me away. 255 career complete games. 255!
Today, you don't have any. If you couldn't get that many complete games if you had everybody in both leagues, the American National League and all the division. That's just not going to happen. And of course, we know the managers with the pitching coaches and everything else, they won't allow it to happen.
Okay, I mentioned 69. In 69, he had 28 complete games. Can you imagine
and
that?
The Cardinals
you're
weren't
lucky
even,
if you get guys who have 1 or 2 now.
The Cardinals weren't even a contender in 69
no, they
after
weren't.
About the first month or so. The team that the Cubs felt they had to beat that year was the Cardinals, and the other team was the Pirates. And they had both of those teams beat out. And all of a sudden, here come the Mutts.
All right, so let's continuing on, because I just think Bob Gibson's, I used to say he's, if not the greatest right-handed pitcher, one of the greatest right-handed pitchers, but I have to expand it. He's one of the greatest pitchers of all time. 2 Cy Youngs. He did win an MVP, a Cy and an MVP in '68. He's a 9-time All-Star, 9 Gold Gloves. You're right about him being a good hitter. He was a .206 career hitter as a pitcher.
Yep.
And one season, 1970, he hit .303.
He would bat for himself in All-Star games. And, in this day and age, that would never, ever, ever happen. There's so many things that would never occur anymore. But could he be a tough guy to deal with at times? Absolutely. But
Yeah,
that's part of what he was all about. And he did not want Tim McCarver, how many times did he want to go out and talk to
Get away
him?
from me.
Get lost. What are you doing out here? And he,
Go back there, son.
exactly right. And Tim McCarver, who was a tough guy in his own right.
They got along off the field.
Yeah, well, today, especially until the day that Gibby passed away.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is there were so many. And then at All-Star games, there were players from other teams, and they would want to shake hands with Gibson. He wouldn't even talk to them.
No, especially guys from the American League. He would never talk to those guys.
Nope, wanted nothing to do with it.
All right, here's one last number on Gibson, and I didn't know this, but when you do your research, you figure it out eventually. He actually had 6 saves. In his career.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember him ever coming into a game as a reliever, but apparently he did. He's early and late in his career.
Got to save in the All-Star game in '65. And by the way, can you tell me who got the game-winning hit in that '65 All-Star game? It was in Minnesota.
It was Ronnie Santo.
He got an infield single. He hit a slow ground ball up the middle, fielded by the then MVP to be that year, Zoilo Versailles, and couldn't throw him out at first base. Santo beat it out.
Yeah. All right, so anyway, rest in peace to Bob Gibson, one of the greats of all time. And those games where it was him and Marichal, or him and Fergie, or him and Koufax, or him and Drysdale.
Koufax was the best left-hand pitcher I ever saw.
Yep, I have to agree. But they both played in the same era. So rest in peace to Bob Gibson, and we just wanted to pay a little homage to him. All right, coming up, we're going to hear from Paul Sullivan in just a moment. And then in our final segment, Stump the Grobber and Names. And we'll be back right after this.
Some of the young guys, I'm sure along the way, have gotten into some bad habits because you're on a team that loses all the time. With Zach, it was always, how many points can I score? Can I make the All-Star team? Can I get some individual recognition? I'm sure Billy's going to get him in a face-to-face conversation and say, you're a prolific scorer, and we love everything about that, but this is what you need to do for us to win games. And if Zach is sincere about all the good things in basketball come through winning, he'll make those changes. If not, he'll probably be moved along to another team.
Zach, by the way, will be playing in his 7th year in the NBA upcoming for his 6th coach.
That's not good.
That blows me away just to even hear it. I mean, I knew about it, but 6 coaches in 7 years? Wow.
And he's never had a winning season, never experienced that in the NBA. So he is like this raw lump of clay, and I think that Billy wants to mold him into a winning player because the physical gifts are off the charts. I'm a big Zach LaVine fan. I know you are as well. Yeah. I think that this is a guy that can be a really important piece on a team that can try to accomplish some lofty things. I know some Bulls fans think that he should be moved along. I think this is a guy that you want to keep on your roster.
Shanowski, Schuster, 2 of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters, sharpshooters.
New episodes every week on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm David Schuster. He, of course, is Les Grobstein. And Les, right now, we're joined by a good friend of ours and a guy who I love following on Twitter. And you can follow him on Twitter at PW Sullivan. And, Sully has always been funny. I've told him many times, I love following you because you find that angle on Twitter that just makes me laugh because he makes fun of the things that I always like for people to make fun of, like when we're at both the ball games and stuff like that. And we're joined by Paul. And hey, Paul, first of all, how you doing, buddy? And good to talk to you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And, I got to say that Twitter, I think that I really kind of pulled my punches the last few years.
Yeah.
But I when it started, I basically said anything, but that was before all the trolls came out. And now you have to be a little more guarded about what you say.
You're absolutely correct. And Paul was at, of course, less, or I should say wasn't at, but he was on the Zoom call for Theo Epstein's post-synopsis, the post-mortems, earlier today. And maybe you can give us a synopsis of what the club's president said about his season previous, now past, and what his upcoming near and far future might be.
Well, as you can imagine, it wasn't really, too specific. Although he did say, significant changes. I think are probably going to be made this off season, especially with, your big guns. So many of your big players up for free agency after next year, and obviously the Lester thing, which we've spoken about forever. Obviously not going to pick up the option year, but still possibility they could re-sign him. Doubtful, but you never know. And as far as this year, he did say one thing that I thought was interesting is about the hitter's inability to catch up with the fastball, to hit the fastballs, which is very concerning because basically, those guys have all made their names on hitting fastballs. Which is why no one would ever throw Javi one for, the start of his career. And then it kind of fell back into that trap. So, I mean, that's something that you really have to be concerned about because, there's so many power pitchers now. It's like every team has, especially you've seen in the playoffs, they have like a whole bullpen full of 97 to 100 mile an hour pitchers. So, a lot of decisions to make, and the number one is his own decision, whether he's going to transition over to Jed or, possibly leave. He didn't say that, but, people think that, if you're going to transition to Jed, maybe, why do you want to even be here? Or, status quo, basically. I don't think he's going to be back after next year, but I think everyone has said that all along anyways.
Yeah, well, he's pretty much said it. He's said basically a planned obsolescence to be with an organization is 10 years, and he's almost followed his own rule more than once. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be here in the long run. But do you think he wants to stay in baseball? There's rumors that he could be the next commissioner, and he couldn't do any worse than the guy who's there right now. Or, he's actually been asked quite a few times, because he's very politically minded, if he might get into politics. So, it's just a guess on all our parts. But if you had to hazard a guess what his future is going forward after next season, what do you think it is with this guy?
Honestly, I would prefer it would be politics, because I've always, as much as I sometimes disagree with him on things, we're pretty much in alignment, politically speaking. And he's very progressive and a very intelligent guy. I told him to his face that, he's wasting his time in baseball. You should go into politics where you could help your country. But he didn't really ever seem open to that for whatever reason. And I'm certainly not the first person that said that to him. I'm not saying that I gave him the idea, but a lot of people have said that because he's just a bright guy and personable guy, and it seems logical. But I'm with you. I don't see him sticking in baseball. It's wishful thinking that he'd replace Manfred, but I don't think Manfred's going anywhere. He could always go to another team and run another team. I heard Peter Gammons talking about maybe San Diego would be a good choice, since he started his career there. But I really see him leaving sports and going into some kind of do-gooder role. I don't know if it'd be charity or whatever, but I think he really thinks of life as much bigger than sports, especially nowadays. And I could see him taking some kind of thing that I think some kind of job where he could help better mankind, help the world. I mean, we need people like that. And what else really does he have to prove in baseball when you think about it?
Hey, Sully, it's Les. I just wanted to get into this lineup. Everybody except for the two H guys, Hap and Hayward. And Hayward is a guy I've been defending all along anyway. He's never hit for this kind of a batting average before, but he had a terrific season. We know he's the best outfielder in that organization, and he might be the best outfielder in Chicago, or maybe even count the Milwaukee Brewers or anything along that line.
Wait. You mean defensively?
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. When you say best outfielder in Chicago, I'm thinking, well, there's a guy named Eloy who's a little better than him, even right now.
Not defensively, he's not.
No, defensively, no. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you got those guys and Happ, who had a terrific year, and I still don't think they have a legitimate leadoff man, although he did a good job in that spot. I've never been a big fan of them leading off with Schwarber or Rizzo or anything. Every so often they might lead off a game with a home run, stuff like that. I've just never been a big fan of that.
Yeah, you didn't like Bryant either, I'll bet.
I like him better than the others, but I don't think, and let's face it, like a lot of the other guys, he's had a miserable season. And I'm a big fan of Chris Bryant, no doubt about that. But let's face it, his season, like so many others, like Baez and Rizzo, who is one of the best people that you'll find anywhere in baseball. But this team, with the exception of those two H guys, stunk this year.
Yeah, and Theo didn't try and deny that. He said his 4 big bats came up with the worst years of their careers, and he's talking about those 3 and Schwarber. We remember last year when Schwarber had that great second half. I went into this season thinking he would be really improved. And, you always have to throw in the caveat that it was only a 2-month season, and over a course of a 6-month season, maybe some of these guys have proven in the past that they would have turned it around, and we never got an opportunity to see that. But certainly you got to at least trade 2 of them, if not 3. I believe Rizzo will be back just because they got the option on him, and he means so much to the Ricketts and Theo because of what he's done for the organization. So I think really either Bryant and Schwarber or Javi and Schwarber will be among those gone, and I don't think they re-sign Lester because unless he takes a zero-sum deal, he's going to get $10 million buyout. So I don't know why you'd want to continue that if you're trying to transition the organization. As much as we love him and everything, but as far as the lineup, I would say probably 2 of those guys, if not all 3, are gone.
What about a guy like Contreras? He's terrific. They've got Caratini, who they've been able to use quite a bit. But I think as far as having all those guys in there. And then I want to talk about, again, Baez and Contreras. Terrific players, terrific in any lineup. But my gosh, these 2 guys, what hotheads. I said that. That's me. That's my opinion.
I would say Wilson. Why is Javi a hothead? I don't know.
They are.
No, Les. Baez is not a hothead. Contreras definitely is.
I think they both are.
Hold on, Sully. All right, Les. Why is Baez a hothead?
Because if anybody, just like with regard to Contreras, gets a pitch inside and he goes nuts off of there. He goes crazy on that. Now I know Contreras is well. That's my opinion. You're entitled to yours. I don't agree with you.
It's not opinion, Les. He's never done it.
It is an opinion.
All right, Sully, go ahead.
You're trying to turn opinion into a fact.
Try and answer that hypothetical on Les's part.
Yeah, I don't agree, so I can't answer that. I do agree, Wilson is definitely a hothead and a hot dog. And, I mean, the bat flip against the White Sox was epic. I thought it was very enjoyable because it was basically an in-your-face to Tim Anderson, and even Anderson seemed to enjoy it, honestly. I don't know about the hothead thing. But Contreras, he had a better second half. His second half is a month. But
let me make it clear too. I think he's a hell of a player too. That's just my own opinion. That's all.
He's one of the better catchers in the league for sure. Whether you can build around him, I don't know. Caratini, to me, I thought that was one of the bigger mistakes Ross made, was that he kept DHing him like the whole season, and he's just a not good enough hitter to be your DH, and Schwarber definitely should have been the DH, I thought. But, that's a whole other thing.
Hey, Sully, before we even get to the White Sox, one more on the Cubs. Obviously, they didn't make the revenue that no owner in baseball made the revenue, but the Cubs certainly didn't make the revenue with the lack of fans and marketing and concessions and, all this stuff that's around Wrigley Field that the Ricketts have bought up. How much is that going to affect? I think it will. How much is that going to affect their decision-making going forward?
Well, you would think it would have affected a lot because they were already, in budget cutting mode before the pandemic. So, then you go a whole season without fans. And according to them, and, I don't have the numbers, but they claimed 70% of their revenues were from gate. So if you figure that at least for the start of 2021, the gate is not going to be, if they're open, there's nothing. And even if they are open, I don't know. I don't see baseball fans clamoring to get out there in April to games. So you're going to go at least part of the season with 0 or far fewer fans. So there's a lot of your revenues there. We don't know about the hotels and the restaurants. It all depends on what Lori Lightfoot's going to do, what Governor Pritzker's going to do as far as, opening up the state. It's the winter, and we're waiting for that second wave. So I don't know. I just don't see the Cubs spending, and in fact, I would have to think they're going to have to cut a lot of these salaries or get rid of a lot of them.
On the White Sox side, Timmy Anderson won the batting title a year ago. This year, he obviously is coming a little bit shy of that. He did one little stretch where he wasn't, but I still think he's a terrific player, has been for a long time. And Abreu, I don't think there's any way he shouldn't be the MVP. I mean, these two guys have been phenomenal, and Sox are a really exciting team to look at.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. I think Anderson had a great year, and there was, he went into spring training, with people doubting that he could do it again because, he's not a guy that takes a lot of walks, and but he did it, and I got to give him props. Even after that bad ending, he was like 1 for 24 in the last week or last 5 games, and then, to come through, he was one of the few players that really came through in the playoffs. As far as Abreu, I think he should win the MVP. I would have voted for him had I had the vote. However, you have to remember that a lot of voters these days are very analytically bent. And if you're looking at analytics, then, I would say Ramirez probably has the edge.
I thought you were going to say anatomically bent.
Yeah.
That would have taken it in another direction altogether.
Well, I think Abreu's got the anatomically bent edge over Ramirez, who's kind of a chubby guy.
Take your word on that one. Hey, Sully, every team's fan base has got to find somebody to rag on when they don't win, and obviously the White Sox fan base is going to rag on Ricky Renteria. I think you wrote a column about this as well. I mean, did he take too much gruff here? And he's not going anywhere, at least not the foreseeable future. Give him a couple more starting pitchers, and maybe one more bat in his lineup. I don't think you'll have too many people rag on him. What do you think?
Oh, no, I think they'll rag on him. That's never going to change. He had, overall, you got to give him props for what he did to get him, that was good to get him into the playoffs. But on the other hand, you also have to remember they had the number 1 seed, with I don't know how many games left, 10, 11, and they blew that. Not only they blow that, they blew the home game. They wound up with that number 7 seed. And not only did they do that, but they blew all they had to do was win game 2, and they had their best, one of the league's best pitchers going. They didn't do that. And then in game 3, whatever you think about the idea of using the bullpen, which, is okay, and teams have proven that it does work, but the way that he did it was not the way to do it. And I know that, Crochet got hurt, they had to take him out, and maybe that screwed up a lot of it, but, you just can't use up so many relievers at the start of a game, and it just didn't make sense to me. So I can understand Sox fans are upset by that. However, like you said, it was a great season, and people should be excited about next year. And, Kopech hopefully will be back. And, we don't know what he can do, but, we've seen him in spring training. He looks good. And, I can see them signing a Trevor Bauer, who said he'll do a 1-year deal. And seems to like Tim Anderson a lot. Maybe they can use him as recruitment.
You put in guys like Giolito and then Keuchel, who did have a bad game against Oakland, but let's face it, those are your top two. If you can add a guy into that whole mix like you were just talking about, Bauer, you put him with those guys, and then just add another bat or two, this has a chance to be a team that goes all the way, at least in the American League.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys think of Engel, but I was really impressed.
Oh, my gosh, awesome. Absolutely awesome.
And he's already a good fielder, so I don't know. Even if he's not going to hit for power like Mazzara, who didn't hit for power, I think he had 1 home run. But I would definitely give him a shot in right field. And then, I don't know, I think you got to cut ties with Edwin. And, I think they have an option on him, but I wouldn't take that. And then use your DH for Eloy, and he's going to have his inevitable injuries, and obviously his fielding is not very good. So I don't know why that was the one thing I didn't understand. I liked most of their moves last year, but I didn't know they didn't need Edwin, and they could just use that DH slot revolving, Yasmani. I hope they re-sign McCann. I don't expect him to because, he's a good catcher, and hopefully someone pays him. But, I think they next year and for years to come. I mean, Rick Hahn signed a lot of these guys to long-term deals. Anderson very underpaid now. When he made that deal, I thought, wow, that's kind of a risk. But Eloy and those guys are signed for years, so we're going to be seeing this team for quite a while, hopefully.
Yeah, I don't think McCann's going to be back, and that's too bad for us reporters because he's always a good quote and a good dude. I think Andrew Vaughn will actually probably be elevated, and and probably be part-time DH and part-time first baseman. And let's face it, he's the obvious first baseman in the future.
And Eloy, he's just got to hit against the Cubs more often, doesn't he?
Yeah, you got to convince Abreu to take some more time off first, and he probably is not going to want to now because he had a very good defensive year at first. It was probably the best since he's been here. But I think another thing is, are you going to trust Yasmani to catch all year? Number one, he's going to be injured at least once or twice, and number two, he's not a very good defensive catcher. I think we found out. I can't remember which game it was. He dropped one throw home. It was an easy out. It went to him, and he just dropped it. And, that little flip from Colomé, he dropped that one. He just doesn't seem to be a very good catcher. He's a good framer. That's about it.
Yeah. Hey, Sully, we appreciate you joining us. Les and I do. And, listen, it wasn't the greatest of baseball seasons. I mean, I guess we could brag that both teams made the playoffs, but, I mean, I want to throw away this whole season to begin with. It almost was like a dream from Dallas that didn't actually happen from the old TV show.
Well, where do you guys rank it? I mean, do you think that the ending was so bad that it kind of negated it, or was it as fun as 2008?
No. Well, 2008, that was great only because, maybe you were there for both games also. I was in Los Angeles to see them get eliminated that night, and then took the red eye back to see the White Sox get eliminated, about 12 or 15 hours later?
Well, the White Sox, at least 1 year, at least the White Sox in 2008 won a game. They beat Tampa Bay once. The Cubs, we remember too well, they got swept. And that first game, one of the best control pitchers in baseball, Ryan Dempster, he couldn't have hit water if he fell out of a boat with trying to throw strikes in that one game.
Yeah, to me, that was a classic game because I've never heard a crowd go that quiet, and then that was it for the rest of the
Bartman
series.
game. The Bartman game, they got even quieter.
Well, the Bartman game, they were booing a lot because they were yelling at Bartman.
Yeah, they didn't get quiet. I remember I was in one of the Johns down the right field line, because we couldn't get into any media Johns. They were all occupied, but whatever. The people that were in there, it was like the scene out of the Frankenstein movies where they all had the torches, and the forks, and they were ready to go after him, and they had to sneak him out of the damn place.
And he didn't do anything wrong either. It wasn't his fault.
Well, here's one more question for you guys. Do you think we're done with the Zooms, or you think Zoom is it
Nope.
from now on?
No.
We wish, but unfortunately, they may ram it down our throat.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, let's see what happens with the whole pandemic and fans and everything. But yeah, Sully, it's been one of my fears from the word go is that, our days of being in clubhouses and on the field, I think they might be history, unfortunately.
I'm with you. It's very sad, and Zooms are, I think, the worst thing for the fans because you don't get those stories that you would get otherwise when we could just roam the locker room and talk to people about whatever we wanted.
Yeah, I have a lot better 4-letter words that I like to swear with, but Zoom has unfortunately replaced those words for me.
Yeah, you're right.
Hey, Sully, we appreciate you joining us, and like I said, I look forward to seeing you sometime in person soon.
Okay, guys, take care.
All right, you too. That's Paul Sullivan, and we'll be back right after this.
Mac is not the man. He's one hell of a football player, I'll take you that. But what always makes great defensive ends is usually, more often than not, Mike, the play of the inside. The inside people. Why? So that they can cave in the middle of that line. And why? So the quarterback can't step up. When the pressure comes from the outside, he can't step up and throw or escape to his weaker, strong side underneath. And if you watch Akeem Hicks, that kid's a monster. He's terrific. And you watch and see how many times Mac benefited.
That was Ed O'Bradovich on the Mike North Advantage, and you can listen to Mike every week right here on the Bears Barroom Radio Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm David Schuster. He's Les Grobstein. Les, it was always good to hear from Paul Sullivan. I've known Sully for a long time. I really enjoyed not only seeing him in person, but reading his columns.
And I basically remember him. I was involved in a little contest. This would have been around 1989 or 1990. I was no longer at WLS. And we had a little contest between certain print media and certain electronic. And Sully, he was like lights out for the print media, and we could not get the best of him. He was terrific. And then it was at Tribune Tower of all places that we had it. Of course, that's who he was working for.
Okay, let's do one of our famous segments here, and this one is called Stump the Grobber.
You're about to witness the work of an eidetic. That is someone whose memories are more vivid beyond that of most mortals. Today, we will put that to the test. This is Stump the Grobber.
Stump the Grobber, a famous segment here on the Grobstein Schuster Zone podcast. And if you are able to stump the Grobber,
T-shirt.
A free T-shirt. So yes, if you hear this, or actually, I'm going to read some of the questions that I put out on my Twitter page and people responded. And so again, if you hear this, or I'll just contact you, you'll let us know what your address is or what your shirt size is, and we'll make sure that you get a shirt. All right, there's some really ridiculous questions here, Les. So I'll tell you those at the end because they're off the wall, but I'll give you some of the real ones. All right, let's start with this one. This is from Stock Guru. You can follow him on Twitter at Spactamin. Okay, I don't understand that, but whatever. All right, he has a question for you, Les. He says, during the Bulls' 72-10 season, their last 3 losses were by how many points combined? And actually, I knew this one.
3.
That is correct.
Yep.
They lost all 3 games by 1 point. Do you remember who the teams were?
Toronto was definitely one of them because they actually lost to Toronto twice that season. And Damon Stoudemire, they could not handle him. He absolutely was a good matchup against that Bulls team for whatever reason. Now, if they'd have met him in the playoffs, that would have been a totally different situation. But that was definitely one of them, and that's the one I remember the most.
Toronto, I think the other 2 were Indiana and Charlotte, if I remember correctly.
Indiana was the one that they got basically stolen from them by Hugh Hollins.
So they finished the season 72-7. If you add, 2 points to each game for the Bulls, they would have been 75-7.
Well, they would have, like I said, won that game that they had at the end of the regular season, the last home regular season game against the Pacers, when Michael Jordan was called for a foul by Hugh Hollins, and it put, I want to say, Mark Jackson at the free throw line.
Yeah, well, Golden State ended up going 73-9 in their season, but they didn't win a championship.
Nope.
So sorry, folks, that means next to nothing.
No, not next to. It means 0.
Okay. So the Bulls had the greatest season in NBA history because they capped it off with a championship. And even the year when they went 72-10, do you remember what this is not a Stump the Grobber question, Les, but do you remember what their record was in the postseason that year? They didn't lose too many of that little.
They got swept in the first round by Miami.
No, the Bulls when they won the.
They swept Miami that year.
Okay.
And the Knicks gave them a tough time. But they did. They lost one game to the Knicks, and that was in overtime. The others they won, and then they played Orlando, and they ended up sweeping them 4-0 on the last 4 games that Shaq ever played in Orlando uniform. And then, of course, they won the finals 4-2. They were up 3-0. They played like crap in Game 4 when they were trying to get a sweep. And then it was a tough game. The next game after that was very tough. But then they came back to Chicago, and before they got on their plane to head back there, they're saying, yeah, we're going to go do this. And I'm thinking, no, you aren't. And when they got back to the United Center, it was all over.
All right, here's a next question for you, Les. This is from Tom Spudich, I think is how you pronounce his name, and you can follow him on Twitter at SpectProf. Sounds like he's a professor. All right. Anyway, name the last left-handed player for the White Sox to play an infield position other than pitcher or first base.
I got no chance on that one, no clue.
I looked this one up, and I'm not 1,000% sure about this one, but this is the last one that I could find, and I had a feeling it was a third baseman, because I seem to recall that there was a third baseman who played an inning or something like that for the White Sox, and what I found was in 1997, and I don't know, I never heard of this guy, Mario Valdez. He was a left-handed fielding third baseman who apparently played an inning at third base.
That was the first year of interleague play, by the way, and Bevington was the manager for the final season.
Well, of course then. Of course, Bevington, Mr. Left-handed brain anyway, to begin with. Anyway, I think that's the answer. I'm not sure.
We don't know for sure, but give the guy a shirt anyway.
Okay, well, all right. Aldo, you have something better?
I think I have it.
What is it?
Mike Squires.
Well, he played first base.
Right. But
did they move him over to third?
It appears that he had an appearance. He became the first left-handed throwing third baseman.
Okay, so
in
it was
at least
Squires.
50 years.
And he caught some games too.
On August 23rd, 1983.
Yeah, Spanky played a lot of positions.
1983, but this guy who I looked up, Mario Valdez, was a left-handed third baseman in 97.
So he may be the last.
So I think the answer is whoever Mario Valdez was, whatever. I think that is the correct answer. Anyway, yeah, for Tom. Hey, Tom, if you're listening, you just want a T-shirt.
Doesn't that guy remind you? Doesn't he own a gas station? Isn't he the Exxon Valdez?
Oh, Mario Valdez. Yes, yeah, he just ran aground. All right, this next one, Les. I don't know how you look up this answer to see what the answer is, but I'll pose the question. Name the only player to hit a home run the same year Babe Ruth hit his last home run and the same year Hank Aaron hit his first home run. Ooh. So I looked up their last years for Ruth and the first year for Aaron. The last year for Ruth was 1935. The first year for Aaron was 1954. The only way you can possibly look this one up, Les, is you have to go over the entire 35 and 54 seasons, every home run hit, and see if there's a common denominator of one name. So obviously it's somebody who started like in the 1935 and pretty much finished in 54.
Didn't the Cubs win the pennant in 35? I think they did. And of course they lost.
I don't know. I wasn't around.
Nor was I.
I wasn't even a thought at that point.
Neither were my parents.
Well, your parents were thoughts. 35?
My mom was 5 years old.
Okay, so she at least was a thought.
Well, her own thought, maybe.
Okay. Anyway, I don't know how to look that one up, Aldo.
I'm trying. I'll work on it.
I don't know how you could. I mean, you have to look up the entire home runs hit in 1935 and 1954. It's a great question. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how you look this one up. Anyway, Bruce, you stumped us. Even if it's a bullshit question, you stumped us. So we'll get you a shirt, and I'll contact you if you hear this. Contact me. If not, I'll contact you. Les, there was some other really goofy ones, so I'm just going to tell you what they are. This is somebody. I won't even say the names. I think this is a serious question. I'm not sure. What did Nick Foles' grandmother wanted to name Nick?
I don't know.
Old Saint Nick?
Yeah, that's the first thing that I thought of. Listen, after he threw an interception.
My youngest grandson is named Nicholas.
Okay, that has no pertinence to this whatsoever.
It does to me.
I know it does to you. Anyway, if he threw an interception, I think even his grandmother would call him, a shitty quarterback. I don't know.
Oh, he could play for the Bears.
He does. When this person tweeted that question to me, of course, I couldn't think of anything else, so I tweeted out the Name Game song with
I saw that.
banana nana doo 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 doo.
It's the Name Game.
That song sucks as much as that question does.
Right. And then there's one more. This guy was pulling my leg all yesterday.
Of course he was.
This one is from Joe Side. And he goes, here's the question. Is it colder in the winter than it is on a farm? And I kept saying, what the F are you talking about? And then he kept, and I think, Aldo, you picked up on this one. I go, are you talking to me in code? What are you doing?
I've been to Fairbanks, Alaska, and trust me, if you guys have never been up there, that's 100 miles from the Arctic Circle, and I was there when it was 32 degrees below zero. Not wind chill factor, but or heat humidity index or whatever you want to call it. I've been up there when it was absolutely colder than hell.
All right, I'm going to ask a stupid question. What the fuck were you doing up there?
UIC was playing hockey against Alaska Fairbanks.
I knew there was a good reason for that.
Don't laugh. The money was good.
Okay, as long as it was. Did you take a dog sled to get there? Mush. Did you do that, Les?
United Airlines, first class.
Oh, okay. You should have entered the Iditarod while you were there.
Well, you know what? Actually, there was a bit that Steve Dahl used to do similar to that, except he said, I did abroad.
Okay. We should get him on one of these podcasts. What do you think?
That'd be fun, yeah.
Do you think you can work that out?
I haven't talked to him in a while, but
why don't you contact him? Because we could talk about all the times we played softball games against.
We never lost to them.
No, we didn't. And there was some big crowds for some of the games we played against them.
They weren't there to see us. They were there
No,
to
I
see
know
them.
it. I'm well aware of that. It was still fun to do.
And nobody got booed louder than me. But I know that a couple of times we had such a big lead and they were still booing loudly. And my parents were both there. And this was when we played them in Des Plaines. And I got a base hit to left field. And as I was heading down to first, I did something I shouldn't have done, but I did anyway. I just turned to the crowd and I went, in your damn faces.
And they all came down and pummeled the shit out of you.
No, they wanted to, but they didn't.
All right, well, that's just something to contemplate. If you can get Steve Dahl on our podcast, that would be a ratings bonanza, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
So, see if you can do that. All right, let's do our last segment here. It's our famous name segment where we run down certain names and Les and I give our opinions on them. Anyway, here's our name segment.
You enter this final segment of the show at your own risk, because what you might think of someone or someplace may not match your reality. Memories could be shattered or confirmed. This is Names and Places.
All right, famous names, Les, and I prefaced by saying these are all Hall of Famers. I will tell you in advance, 2 of them are still with us. 2 of them, unfortunately, have passed, and the first one just passed recently, and like I've been saying, whether on this or other podcasts, this one hit me pretty hard because I knew Gale Sayers. At different stages of mine and his life, I came across Gale quite a few times. But anyway, you start with Gale Sayers.
First time I saw him, I was 13 years old. I had my own season ticket. The Bears sold me 1 ticket for every home game. And in 1965, that was the year Butkus and Sayers were they had 3 first-round picks, and they took those 2 guys first of all. They also took Steve DeLong, who they didn't want to pay him, so he signed instead with the San Diego Chargers. But the best game, and this was the second to last game of the regular season, Gale scored 6 touchdowns against the San Francisco 49ers. And the Niners, in the opening game of the year at Old Kezar Stadium, which is in Golden Gate Park, it's still there, by the way, they ran up 52 points. So then the Bears scored like 61 in the rematch. And I remember Jack Brickhouse at the end of that broadcast says, "We're going to get them again, and we're going to murder the bums." And they did murder the bums. And Gale Sayers was a really fun, nice guy. And I remember I called Rick Weaver's show on WBBM radio. I wasn't on the air, but I called his show because they had Sayers on there. I said, "What about Dick Butkus or yourself being candidates for Rookie of the Year?" And he said, "I hope Dick or myself are, and gave a great answer.
All right. Gale Sayers was one of my many childhood idols. I mean, I used to, sit in front of the TV. I mean, the Bears were no good, of course, but I mean, he was. Matter of fact, a lot of Chicago teams were no good, but they all had great players. Well, there was Ernie Banks with the Cubs, or Gale Sayers, the Bulls teams. It wasn't long before Jordan, but they had some great players, and hockey, Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, what have you. But Gale Sayers was just magic. He was a thoroughbred, and what he could do on a football field, not even if it was muddy, of course. I mean, he had such an unfair advantage because the
six touchdown game, that field was muddy at Wrigley Field.
At Wrigley Field, but. There's so many plays, and I remember there was one play specifically, and I think it was against Baltimore at their old Memorial Stadium.
He outran the fastest guy in the league, Lenny Lyles.
Well, the play that I'm thinking of, and maybe it was that one also, it was a sweep to the right, and he was going towards the sideline, and all of a sudden, Baltimore it was stacked. They were going to tackle him, maybe. So what he did is he reversed course and ran all the way back to the other sideline behind the line of scrimmage, and then he zigzagged on his way down the field and got into the end zone. So a 50-yard run became like an 80-yard run, and it was just magic. And he just did that all the time, and he was so magical. And then. I got the first time I met him in person, I went to school at Southern Illinois. I was working in the radio and TV department, and Gale Sayers was named the athletic director. And then all of a sudden, I'm in front of Gale Sayers. He's the athletic director who I got to deal with, on a semi-regular basis.
Too bad the Salukis didn't have him as a player.
He could have still played. He was 32 years old when he was named the athletic director.
And when he blew out his knee in that game in 1968 against San Francisco, ironically, he won the rushing title the next year, but he wasn't the same player.
No, he was not the same player. I mean, much like Sandy Koufax in a way, they burned out too quickly because of injury, but he was just so fucking good. Anyway, so I got to meet him at Southern Illinois, and it was just a treat for me, and I was tongue-tied the first time I talked to him. And then I met him a couple of other times. And I did meet him a couple of other times, Les, and each time he was so gracious. I mean, he was so good about signing autographs. I mean, a lot of former players, specifically Hall of Famers, even though they write the HOF and they probably get, I don't know, maybe they get more signing shows and all that kind of nonsense, but he was always good with the fans. And to see, unfortunately, when a lot of people get old, unfortunately this happened with my father as well. So it really, hits home with me. But to see a world class, I mean, the best of all time athlete, unfortunately, see what happens to them and their bodies. It's just really sad.
There were two guys, one before him, one after him. Before him, the late, great Willie Gallimore, who was one of the reasons they won the championship in 1963, and I got to meet him. It was in 63, and they were on their way to winning the title or whatever, and they had just beaten the Packers and all the rest of that, and met him at Marshall Field's State Street store, which, of course, is not even called Fields anymore. It's Macy's now. Couldn't have been nicer. And then, sadly, the following spring during training camp at Rensselaer, Indiana, he and Bo Farrington were killed in a crash. And then later on, of course, and you saw him play a million times,
Walter.
So did I. Well, Walter was fantastic, too, and he may have been the best all-around running back they ever had, maybe topped only by the late, he's still alive, and that was Jim Brown. But Devin Hester.
Oh, Devin Hester, certainly and he will get into the Hall of Fame, by the way,
He better.
Well, he will, because he was the best of all time at doing it. All right, let's move on. The next name on our list, again, Hall of Famer, still with us, Frank Thomas.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic player. I was so happy when he got into the Hall of Fame the first time he was eligible. And this was a big thrill for me. I was in Houston when the White Sox won the World Series. They swept the thing 4-0. We know Big Frank was injured. He helped them quite a bit during the first maybe 2/3 of the season. Then he was down with an injury and he was on the disabled list the rest of the year. I got into the clubhouse. They opened it rather quickly after they had won. And the first guy I saw in there was Frank, and I went right up to him. I said, "Look, I know you wanted to play, but this was just as much about you as it was." And he had a big smile on his face, and he really appreciated me saying that. And it was a big thrill to be able to say that because the guy was a fantastic player. And he's a nice person. I don't care what anybody says. Some people don't buy that. He is a great guy.
Well, Frank, and I covered his whole career. I mean, Frank was moody. I mean, there were some days he was so good to talk to about almost anything, but there were other days he just was a little on the standoffish side. Listen, I can't identify with having that kind of talent and being berated all the time by the media. So, I'm just simply saying that he was up and down, okay? As a player, though, as a hitter, oh my God. I mean, he's in the conversation of greatest right-handed hitters of all time.
No question.
I mean, when you think of the greatest hitters, you think mostly of left-handers, okay? And they have a little bit of advantage or closer to first base and might be able to leg out a hit here and there that the righties from the right side of the plate can't get to. But Frank could do anything. I mean, he obviously had power. He hit the 500-plus home runs, but he had power to all fields. He could spray to all fields. I mean, if you wanted a single or a double, he could do that as well. He didn't always hit the home runs.
And he could hit it to all fields all the time without question.
Yeah. I mean, he was almost, in a way, and I say this complimentary, he was almost like a softball player because, your great softball players, especially 16-inch, I mean, they can tell you where the ball's going to go all the time. You see that the fielders are playing a certain way and they got the left field line open, they'll hit it down the left field line. It's just that simple. Frank could do that also at the major league level, which is freaky good. So yeah, Frank Thomas, no question, one of the great hitters of all time, and deservedly so in the Hall of Fame.
No question.
All right, next up, also deservedly so in the Hall of Fame, still with us, Scottie Pippen.
Of course he belongs in there, and I mean he's the second best player in Bulls history. He absolutely, like Michael Jordan, 6 appearances in the NBA Finals, 6 rings. And the two of them together, people are talking about how, wow, you got LeBron James and Davis together. That's a great combination. And they are. But the best combination was Michael and Scottie, without question. And, Shaq and Kobe, were they great? Absolutely they were. They were fantastic. The bottom line is Michael and Scottie, they never lost in the NBA Finals. Everybody else I mentioned has done it, except Anthony Davis. And, he's got a lot of basketball ahead of him yet, Chicago native. But Scottie Pippen, moody at times, you betcha. Absolutely. But when he wanted to be, he could be very engaging.
Scottie Pippen, of course, starting with basketball, just an unbelievable player. I mean, as good as Michael was, and he was, obviously, he's the greatest of all time. I mean, Scottie's right up with him in a lot of areas, where actually Scottie might have even had a little bit extra than Michael was on the defensive end of the court.
In 91, when they were playing the Lakers in the finals,
they stopped Magic. They stopped him.
They took Michael off of Magic and they put Scottie on him, and he drove Magic crazy.
Yeah, in their absolute heyday, during the first incantation, the first trilogy, when Michael and Scottie and Horace, actually, they were called the Dobermans on defense. And when they turned up the defense, I mean, easy baskets obviously pursued because they would have the other team turn it over. Scottie was so good. He could guard point guards. He could guard all the way up to probably 4s. I don't know if he could guard a center, but from 1 to 4, he could guard anybody. Scottie was also an underrated shooter, and what I remember most about Scottie, because I loved hitting bank shots from weird angles, but nobody hit more bank shots from weird angles. And when I say weird angles from the TV, you go, well, you can't bank the shot in from there. He would.
Yes, he could.
I mean, he might have been, if not the greatest, the second greatest bank shooter I ever saw. The other one being Jamal Wilkes. Jamal Wilkes was a great bank shooter.
Keith Wilkes, Silk.
Yeah, that's right, Silk, right. Anyway, Scottie was moody, there's no question about that, up and down. But to his teammates, Michael was Michael, obviously, but his teammates would always say Scottie was even the better teammate because Michael would berate everybody in practices or sometimes off the court and make fun of them or what have you, most of the time in a kidding fashion. But Scottie was the one, if they had a problem, they would go to.
He was on his way to being the MVP in 94, and that was the first year Michael was not with the team. At least that whole year he was not. He was playing baseball in Birmingham. But Scottie at that point, that was that one playoff game with the Knicks where he wanted to be the guy to take the last shot in a tie game because Patrick Ewing had just tied the game. He refused to do it. He says, that's it, I'm not going in. And he sat down. And luckily, Tony Kukoc bailed him out by hitting a long shot. But all the New York writers are saying he shouldn't be playing the rest of the series. They should sit him down. And I'm thinking, you assholes, you just want the Knicks to be able to win the series. And they did anyway, thanks to that piece of crap Hugh Hollins.
Right. All right, the last name less, once again, another Hall of Famer, God rest his soul, Stan Mikita.
Knew Stan very well. Have a piece of... several pieces of tape I have with Stosh. And when they put the statues of him and Bobby Hull outside the United Center, and I interviewed both of them, I still have the tape somewhere, and maybe we'll bring it out in the future one day here for one of these podcasts. And I said, what's it like seeing this statue of yourself and Bobby out there? And he goes, Lester, it's something I'll never forget. I thought when they first called me to tell me about this, I thought they were bringing me in here to fire me. And of course, and that was typical Stan. Great sense of humor, funny as could be. And he and Bobby Hull remained good friends right up to the time Stan passed away.
So many things about Stan Mikita that, as a player again. And first of all, he came over from Czechoslovakia. And he didn't speak a word of English.
Now known as the Czech Republic.
Right. And he first of all, he was in Canada. He went to Canada to live with, I think, an aunt of his or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then, ultimately he came to the United States and, with the Blackhawk organization. And Stan early in his career was a dirty player. I mean, he had 200-plus minutes in a couple of...
And he got into a lot of fights, which he won the Lady Bing many times later in his career, though.
He made a very conscious decision of changing himself. Not easy to do, by the way. And so he went from sort of like a sneaky, sort of, devilish, dirty player, for lack of better terms, and he became the Lady Bing Trophy winner, which goes to like the most outstanding,
most gentlemanly
person
player
of the game. Now, goes without saying, he's an unbelievable player. I mean, he could
best face-off guy I've ever seen.
Stick handle with the absolute best of them, and of course, won Stanley Cup very early in his Blackhawk career.
61, he and Bobby Hull both did. Now we know that Stan was a great face-off man. In this day and age, Jonathan Toews and the current Blackhawks, fantastic player. Stan was just better.
Yeah. Anyway, God rest his soul. And Les, I appreciate again you doing this podcast. No, I wasn't going to say God rest Les's soul. Aldo thought I was going to say God rest your soul. Well, God rest everything about both of us going forward. But no, not God rest your soul. Well, you know what? God bless your soul, Les.
I didn't sneeze.
Not God rest your soul. Anyway.
Gesundheit to you, too.
All right, I'll look forward to an upcoming cast, and you will be working on getting Steve Dahl. Steve, if you're listening, love to have you on. Maybe we'll even do a Steve and Gary,
You got no chance of let that happen.
What news that would be.
That is not going to happen.
Can you get Catherine Johns on or somebody?
Possibly.
Okay.
Catherine and I are still good pals, and we're Facebook friends and all. And
we should get Tommy Edwards to come on.
Yeah, but he doesn't live in Chicago anymore.
I know.
They moved out west.
Tommy will come on. We both know Tommy.
Tommy is one of the best.
You know what? Folks, if you're listening, Les is going to get Steve Dahl, and I will get Tommy Edwards. How about that?
And we'll work on Catherine in the future.
Okay. All right, anyway, folks, we will talk to you soon. Take care.
The Barroom Network produces over a dozen podcasts. You want them all delivered to your device, meaning your phone, your tablet, your computer? All you have to do is Google Bears Barroom Radio Network, and you will find platforms like iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. Go ahead and subscribe, and they will be delivered to your device. Totally free. Bears Barroom Radio Network.